Carowinds recently announced that they're adding an awesome new thrilling water attraction to the park. But could something like that be beneficial to Kings Island too? Hello, everybody. Alongside Don Helbig, I'm Ryan Suhr, and this is Tower Topics.
New episodes of Tower Topics, they drop 3 times a week, every Monday, Wednesday, and Friday. So listen wherever you get your podcast or watch on YouTube. And be sure to tell a Kings Island fan to subscribe to Tower Topics today. So, Ryan, did you get a chance to take a look at what Carowinds announced? I think it's pretty impressive.
Yeah, it's definitely cool. Let me get a photo pulled up here. But it's... I had to clarify this because it looks like kind of like a flume or a shoot-to-shoot kind of thing. It's made by Whitewater, like the water slide manufacturer. So I remember asking people, like, is this in the water park or not? But it's not.
No.
Now, Carowinds did not have a water ride outside of the water park for several years. And
Right.
this is kind of the replacement for that.
Yeah, but it is certainly impressive. Breaks like 3 world records, 100-foot drop. If you watch the animation video, the POV of it, I mean, looks like it's going to be a lot of fun. But when you look at Kings Island, it's known as more of a coaster park. But you have to ask the question, Ryan: does every major investment need to be a roller coaster? Does everyone need to have a roller coaster coming? You see that all the time, that Kings Island needs this roller coaster. They need that. They need an RMC, to be on the map. They've been on the map since 1972. People have been coming since then. But could a signature water attraction provide, to me, could it provide greater value to guests in the park? I think it would.
Yeah. To me, I mean, something like this will be awesome, and I would certainly be excited for it. What it would need, and this would be the caveat here, is you run into the problem, more so in Cincinnati than Charlotte, that you can only ride it a couple months out of the year because a lot of times it's too cold. So I know that Night Flight Expedition at Dollywood will get you wet, but it's going to run in the winter, so they have a mode where it does not get you wet. It would be neat if they had something like that, where you can run it during Winterfest or something, where it's more of a, you're riding on water rather than you're riding through water kind of situation. I think that can be done. I mean, if Night Flight can do it, I don't see why this one can't. You adjust the water and so on.
Yeah, but let's look at Kings Island though. So they have 15 roller coasters. So I think the park already, offers a pretty strong lineup across, pretty much every thrill level there. You got families, teens, and enthusiasts. Have numerous coaster choices at Kings Island. So I think another coaster risks competing with existing rides, rather than filling a gap. That again is just my opinion on that. But what coaster experience is currently, missing that Kings Island doesn't already offer that would, and this is the key point, Ryan, that would truly move the needle?
So I know it's a rhetorical question, but there is an answer. And a high thrill family coaster a la Big Bear, which seem to be popping up everywhere, is certainly something that would move the needle, and it would be perfect for Kings Island. Are they ready to make that investment? Probably not right now, but I think that would move the needle a lot more than a flying coaster or an RMC or 4D, whatever. That is one thing that I think would really, really affect Kings Island in a positive way.
Yeah. Now let's talk about what a major water ride like Carowinds is adding, would do to Kings Island. It would certainly add the value. The park's current water rides, let's be honest, they're aging. Whitewater Canyon remains popular, but is nearing the end. Congo Falls, a classic, shoot-to-shoots attraction, but not as popular as it once was. And, certainly nearing the end, kind of being held together by Band-Aids. Every year it has some downtime in that, but the maintenance, team there does a spectacular job of keeping that going. But Kings Island no longer has that signature water attraction that, generates that national attention that Carowinds is going to get next year when this attraction opens. So for me, a water ride would create excitement for guests who don't necessarily ride coasters. And there's a lot of them that go to Kings Island that don't ride coasters. It appeals to a broader audience than roller coasters. Not everyone wants a 300-foot roller coaster. That's true. coaster fans. Not everyone wants that. Families often, they enjoy riding water rides together. There's not enough at Kings Island to do, for families where they can all experience something at the same time. So I think that would be kind of an appeal, multi-generational appeal with this. Water rides can become a centerpiece attraction for visitors who are not those thrill seekers, like I said. You got families with children, you got the grandparents, you got the casual visitors, you got the repeat local guests. There's a lot to like about what Carowinds is doing and why it would fit at Kings Island.
Yeah. Do you think this seems pretty thrilling to me? Do you think that this would scratch the itch for people that don't ride coasters? Do you think that you think that it's like, yeah, it's a flume, it's not as bad as a coaster, and they'd ride that? Because this looks pretty thrilling in my opinion.
Oh yeah, I mean, it's absolutely looks thrilling, and like I said, 3 world records is going to get a lot of attention. The flume ride that Kings Island has had since 1972, it's still very popular, but it's not to this level, what they're doing, so I think it'd be a really good addition. And, when you look at, you talked about it's, kind of chilly in that at certain times of the year, but the summertime temperatures in Southwest Ohio, they routinely reach the upper 80s and 90s. Guests, they're always looking for ways to cool off. Not everyone's going to head over to Soak City Water Park. So a major water attraction would be, both a ride and a relief from the heat.
Yeah. I mean, I agree. I definitely see the value in it. And this is also going to be one of those things where, what are they going to do with it? If it was under the current conditions where, you got a PR guy for 9 parks and so on, like this isn't going to do what they think it is. But if they have somebody specializing in each park, and it seems like they're going that direction, I really think that creative marketing could definitely move the needle on, what they're trying to do at Carowinds. I know that this park desperately needed a water ride. I'm surprised it took this long to get one after they removed the last one. Mm-hmm. But this definitely has that spot, and it's worthy of a ride. It seems like it's very family friendly, and I think it'll be a home run for them. I really do.
Yeah, fun, thrilling, repeatable. I think it's all those things for Carowinds. But when you look at the modern water rides, they have high hourly capacity. That's important. Longer ride durations, that helps absorb the crowds. I think the one at Carowinds, the Rip Roaring Falls, it's going to exceed 6 minutes, so that's a long ride. So there's a lot of value there with that, so they can move large numbers of guests here. It reduces the pressure on major coaster queues when you have a ride like this that's absorbing that many guests, and it improves the overall guest flow.
Yeah. It sounds like it would be, I don't know if it would be necessarily a capacity eater or anything, but in terms of capacity of the park, I think it's going to draw a lot of people, and it might affect the other lines, which is definitely an upside that not a lot of people talk about when it comes to, ride additions. I mean, if you ever seen what Kings Island's like when the Beast is down, or Orion or Diamondback, Banshee, any one of those, and it sticks, 800, 900 people into other lines that for similar rides. It is definitely felt. So I think that this will probably positively as in shorter impact the lines of all the other rides, everything up to, Fury 325.
Yeah. Now, we'll certainly hear about it in the comments, but as I looked at what Carowinds is doing and watched the video of it, man, that would fit perfectly in the vortex spot. It would be a terrific visual, right in that spot. But let's just say that Kings Island did decide to do something like this.
Mm-hmm.
It would need a name. It would need a theme. So Kings Island has several, I think, rich storytelling opportunities there. Possible themes. You could, the Miami River, logging, operation, Ohio River transportation history. You've got all that going there. The Rivertown expansion, if you wanted to put it in Rivertown, get rid of the Big Ten box back there, move it there. Beast inspired, lumber camp type setting. There's a lot of opportunities there for, marketing with the right name. So what are your thoughts on that?
Oh yeah. And if this were at any of the other Six Flags parks, besides the Legacy Cedar Fair ones, it would be the Voyage of and it would have like
whatever it's called. Yes.
Oh my God. And they copyrighted something else that's horrendous the other day. I think that Kings Island and Carowinds are a little bit smarter than that. And I think Kings Island would give us something simple, but tell you exactly what it is. And if I just can't come up with the name off the top of my head, Miami River Lumber Company.
They could do that, but remember though, they brought back Phantom Theater, so they could always bring back Kenton Cove's Keelboat Canal.
I wouldn't be against that either.
No. But look at Carowinds though. So if you're PR, you're marketing, you got a lot to work with here. You got the world's tallest flume drop. That's marketable. Mm-hmm. World's tallest reverse drop. That's marketable. You've got the world's tallest reverse Amelback drop. That's marketable. So there's a lot to work with there.
Oh yeah, absolutely. And again, this is definitely leaning into almost more thrilling than family friendly. But I think that's really neat. And it's always the adage of KISS, keep it simple, stupid. So world's largest flume drop. Okay. World's largest reverse drop. Okay. I think the Camelback drop thing, that's a little bit, you'd have to explain what that is to people. I mean, I guess the name kind of explains what it is to an extent, but the world's tallest flume drops in general, yeah. I think is enough to really kind of like get people to raise their eyebrows at it.
Yeah, but I certainly like what they're doing. I think it's impressive. I think it's going to get a lot of attention. And I think something like that is a greater need at Kings Island than a new roller coaster that everyone is, talking about, whether it's 300 feet tall or, they want a dive coaster, a wing coaster, they want, all kinds of different rides. So they want a Alpen Fury, something like that there. I think this, for the coaster fans, they want coasters and that's it. Anything short of that, they're not happy. But I think for the majority of guests that go to Kings Island, and we're talking more than 90%, it's families and they're looking for things that they can do together. And I think this is perfect.
I think so too. So what kind of record count should Kings Island go for, if they were going to build one?
That would be, if you're asking me, I think I would try to go for the longest and the tallest.
Most inversions in a log flume. That'd be cool.
I think that's what I would do. But yeah, longest water ride, maybe the largest splashdown, it has the biggest. Think of the visuals of that guests would be able to get from that ways if it had the largest splashdown.
I was watching a video on Giraffica at Holiday World, and apparently Will Cook was very, very public about how he was disappointed that the splash wasn't as big as he kind of envisioned it would be. I'd like to think that, the water dynamics, aqua dynamics or whatever, maybe like the calculations have improved, but it would be neat because, with Diamondback, I mean, those things scoop up the water 50 feet in the air. Yeah. I mean, I wonder what you could do with the log flume. You don't have as much velocity, but I do like the idea of the world's biggest splash. I think that's a cool idea. What I would do though, and which I think is a missed opportunity for Diamondback, is the same thing that they have at I think it's Shikra at Busch Gardens, Tampa, where you can go down and you can actually get like hit by the water. I would have something that,
That's a cool element for the non-riders. But I think, when you look at this too, you're Kings Island, so I think you would want to make it the most immersive themed water attraction in the chain.
Yeah. Animatronics and stuff. I think Knott's has that. I know Mall of America does. And I think that was originally a Cedar Fair thing. But yeah, you have animatronics in the tunnels and stuff, and you can do lights. You have indoor sections, clearly, so you can do anything you want indoors, Yeah,
exactly. Now here's the other thing. The position that Six Flags is in right now financially, you got to think about that, as you're looking at future additions here over the next few years. A major coaster, what everyone's wanting, is going to cost anywhere from $25 to $40 million or more.
Mm-hmm.
So a signature water ride, may reach a broader audience and would cost a lot less than that. Guests, they always remember unique experiences, not just height and speed statistics. So I think that would be important.
I agree. And then I talked about how the next couple of years are going to be super interesting because I think we're going to learn in real time the effect that a lot of these new attractions have. The Curse of the Werewolf or whatever the one they're putting at Fiesta Texas is called. That's going to be very telling. I think the Tormento thing will be very telling too, because I've got a feeling that, You got a 300-foot Giga dive coaster. I've got a feeling that 5 days after it opens, no one's going to care anymore. Because when it comes down to it, it's another dive coaster. And I think that they don't have the luxury of that anymore. They have to have something that they can use to center around their marketing for several years. I think that they kind of lucked into the Phantom Theater thing, because I think that a lot of the people that were kind of involved didn't understand in a lot of ways how much Phantom Theater meant to the people of Kings Island. So when they brought it back, like, they can probably squeeze 2 or 3 years of marketing out of it and probably successfully do that. But the reality is, if they had a full understanding of this, it would have come a year earlier. It would have been more appropriate to do it closer to the 50th anniversary, closer to when they had the show. Heck, they would have brought the show back if they were smart.
Right.
But I feel like they kind of lucked their way into it. And you and I have discussed, like, new for next year, we probably won't see hardware. And that's just a guess. We're not making like a spoiler or anything, but I think that the center of their marketing materials is going to be Phantom Theater Encore. I don't necessarily think that it's going to, I think that it'll have a much better move of the needle than Tormento will, even in August. And I think that might play into things like adding attractions like this that have a little bit more of a broad appeal. Maybe the price tag's better. We don't know. I imagine it's not cheap, but it's probably not even $25 million. And again, if you put something like this in Carowinds and it does move the needle, you better believe they're going to look at where else they could put these things, especially if it's got the uptime and stuff.
No, exactly. I mean, you would think that Kings Island, Cedar Point would be two prime locations for something like that. But, I'd be all about it. I think that, I'm not someone that feels that they have to have another roller coaster at Kings Island. It's not like people aren't going to come through the gates. They certainly do. I have a little bit of that insight knowledge from working there to know, what's moved the needle and what hasn't moved the needle. So I'm not, in that, in the coaster community, you think if it's not a new coaster, people aren't going to want to come. People do come. And some of the best years Kings Island has ever had has been when it's been, rides that the families can do together, or something that's in the kids area, or something that's out in Soak City. Those have been the better years, than sometimes the big major coaster installations.
Okay. And I do want to clarify, because you're going to have park shills that when Kings Island goes cheap on something and they put in a carnival ride, they're like, it's a family park. We've had this discussion before. I want to say it again for the people in the back. Clearly there's a market for gigas and stuff like that. They wouldn't do it if there wasn't. So what you're saying is that some of the best years are, Soak City and Planet Snoopy and stuff like that.
Snoopy, yeah.
And I think obviously the data would back you up, but it's not like if they put in, when they put, Orion's a bad example. When they put in Banshee, that was a slum year because it was a coaster. Nobody goes those years. Obviously, there's a reason why they do that. They do it very strategically. And again, you can market that over several years. While, coming to see our new water park attraction is probably a little bit more of that year. That's why they amortize stuff over like 5 years for the coasters. It's because, they're still selling tickets based on Banshee and Diamondback.
Yeah. So I had like access to the season passes, what years were moving, the needle the most, and including renewals. And I know, like 2015, it was the two flat rides and Planet Snoopy.
Mm-hmm.
Snoopy Space Buggies and the Flying Scooter return, and people were excited about that. And it was a good year, really good year for the park. When they put in Tropical Plunge, really good year for the park. So it doesn't always have to be a big new coaster. Those aren't the only, people aren't just coming for that. And you got to think about it too, is the bigger the coaster and the height requirements and that, anyone under 54 inches can't ride a lot of times.
Or I would say, I would even make the argument, not necessarily like more people would come for Diamondback than Orion, because I feel like if you ride one, you'll ride the other. But I bet if there's inversions, that cuts out a percentage of people too. That won't do it.
It does. And when you look at, like Mystic Timbers, not the longest, fastest, tallest, or anything, family coaster. But because of the height requirement, 48 inches, that was a terrific year for season passes. So you put something like a Big Bear Mountain in, you're going to get the same kind of, I think, return that you would have got with Mystic Timbers, which was far greater than what you got for Orion and Diamondback, So you want things that families can do together. I know that's hard for some to understand that are the big thrill seekers, and they're after the biggest, and they want a top thrill, too. They want a Siren's Curse, those kind of rides. That's great, but it only, it's not for everyone. And you got to look at the bigger picture of who your guests are and look at the, all the analytics and stuff. And that's why those decisions get made a lot of times, is because they have that information and they're making the right call for what the audience is. At Cedar Point, you have more thrill seekers going there, so it makes more sense to go that route. Kings Island has more families, so it makes more sense to go the Mystic Timbers route.
I also think that there's an argument for the fact that Cedar Point has a couple resorts too, so they need to draw people from further away. That's why they can justify a Top Thrill 2 and then the next year a Siren's Curse. I agree that there's more thrill seekers that go there, but it's still only a certain percent. I mean, we don't get over that hump of, if it's too tall, some won't ride. If it has inversions, some won't ride. If it goes too fast, some won't ride. That still happens, even if there's more the thrill seekers and stuff. But I think that, if they're getting people to book hotel rooms at Breakers because they've got the first tilt coaster in North America or whatever, I think there's an argument for that. But that also is kind of one of those things where, well, if Kings Island were to build a hotel, we might start seeing more stuff like that because they have to fill those rooms.
That would change a little bit. Exactly. You'd be bringing a broader base of guests, from outside the market again. Right now it's pretty much a local draw, for the most part. You still get, those coming from Chicago and Detroit and Pittsburgh and Atlanta and that, but not like they used to. When the Beast first opened, Vortex first opened, I mean, it was, they were drawn from all over the world.
Right. And they still can. This is absolutely by their doing. We talked about memberships recently, and that is not going to help either, as far as nobody with outside of their zip code is going to go. But eventually they're going to have a leadership class that looks at it and realizes the mistakes they've made. Everything is so like elastic, I feel like, because we had the coaster wars of the 2000s, and then we had the family period after the 2000s, things like the backlot stunt coaster and stuff like that. And then it became like events. And now I feel like, what would the period be now? I would say like we're still in events in a way, but I feel like we're getting a little bit back to the thrill stuff. I'm talking industry wide, not at Kings Island. But I feel like, anytime that there's a leadership class, they always look at it. Now, Bill Mefford said something to me that I equate to a lot of stuff. And this was back after 2005 when they had Winterfest for 1 year. It completely dudded. And, everybody at Cedar Fair was like, it's never happening again. It's never happening again. And I was like, I bet it will eventually. I was right. But I remember asking Mefford about it. And Mefford said, it's definitely going to happen again. I was like, why do you say that? He said, because eventually there's going to be a CEO in there or park manager or whatever, and they're going to look at it and they're going to be like, I bet we can make money during these months that the park's closed. And I think that reigns true for a lot of this too, where it's kind of like, we're drawing a lot from this zip code. We have a pretty good lineup. I bet if we had our own hotel, we could pull business away from Great Wolf Lodge, and hotels are very high margin too. That's how they could justify $100 million expansions to Breakers, And then, you have people in the hotel, and now you got to fill that. So like, well, let's make an investment. So we do draw people from Chicago and Indianapolis and stuff like that, where it makes sense to stay at the hotel on property. So I'm very optimistic about the long-term future of Kings Island, because this whole thing of let's put in like the world's shortest giga and kind of a water coaster, that kind of stuff, that's not going to last forever because that's unsustainable. But with that being said, new leadership classes coming in. And I'm not saying John Riley's going to do this. I don't know how he thinks about Kings Island. He always thinks that he mentioned that it's the most penetrated park. I don't think that's necessarily true. We don't have a resort. But I think that everything comes to fruition. And I think that if they end up going the resort route eventually, that's when you're going to start seeing new, fresh stuff rather than old, tired stuff.
Yeah. Speaking of river racers, we haven't really heard much about that since last year in June after Memorial Day weekend. Pretty much it. But Ryan, question for you.
Mm-hmm.
So would the average guest be more excited about another coaster or a completely new experience, unlike anything else in the region?
Define the average guest. Are we taking okay, when we're talking about the average person, I think that this question is more complicated than you're intending it to be, in my opinion. Because I think if you talk to the average person, you can say we're getting a coaster. It's going to be 400 feet tall. It's going to have 6 inversions. You can get people excited about that because they can visualize it. But if it's something new and you have to explain what it is, I think that's what people are like, kind of like, I'm out. And I think that was part of the problem with like Tomb Raider the ride, because you can't tell somebody that it's a top spin in a box. Now, with that being said, this is a log flume. That's, people understand that. And if it's going to have like show elements and stuff, if you can kind of like express that, I think that would get people excited. But, when we talk about the average guest, I think that, if depending on what you're saying with average, if we're talking about a 15-year-old, they're going to be more excited about the coaster. But if you start talking to families and stuff, when that have 7, 8-year-old kids, I think that maybe this would move the needle a little bit more. What do you think?
I think the average guest would probably want something that's unlike anything else in the region. They want something that's different, something that they can't do anywhere else. I think there's a appeal to that, something that can't be done anywhere else. But let's talk about, okay, now this is going to be a hot topic here.
Oh gosh.
What about the vortex spot? So say you wanted to go the Carowinds route and you wanted to put in just a record-breaking water ride like this. So many fans, they immediately assume the vortex site should be reserved for a roller coaster. But could a world-class water attraction actually fit that area a little bit better, visually? Would that be better in that spot? The opportunity to create a dramatic visual, like centerpiece in that part of the park, or even as you came, because of the height and everything of it, you would see it from, International Street, or if you're up in the Eiffel Tower, looking down at that area, you'd be able to see that. So I think it would be a dramatic, visual, centerpiece. So talk about that a little bit. Do you think that spot has to be reserved for a coaster, or could it be used for something else?
So it doesn't have to be reserved for a coaster. I'm going to go ahead and say that. Now, I think that spot is kind of sacred in terms of, you mentioned it before, the visuals. All right. So whatever goes there can't be something that doesn't draw a crowd. Now, with that being said, this kind of comes to mind. They would have to have, I would even go as far as saying, like, it'd be cool to have a splashdown kind of parallel to the midway, so it splashes maybe 1.5 feet onto the midway. I think that would be kind of neat. But yeah, I think this could be kind of neat for that spot. I don't think it has to be a coaster, so long as it's something for people to look at from that stupid basketball game that's never open anymore. That kind of area.
Yeah, 3-point challenge, right?
Right.
All right. Now this is going to be the closing question. So leave us a comment if you're watching on YouTube. So leave us a comment. So if Kings Island announced tomorrow that its next major attraction would be a record-breaking, heavily themed water ride instead of a roller coaster, would you be excited or would you be disappointed?
Yeah, leave us a comment and let us know. I'm very curious as to how people feel. And obviously, you want to base it off of what we're seeing at Carowinds. So don't think like a kiddie ride. Think of kind of thrilling ride. But Don, let's move on. We have some more news out of Kings Island, and Kings Island had initially announced their events for 2026, and they had Star Spangled Night celebrating America's 250th anniversary. And there was a grammatical error because it was only Star Spangled Night, just July 4th. And then they changed it on the website, and I guess it was a mistake, which is weird because all the other parks were doing it a couple days. I got an email today that says Star Spangled Nights, July 3rd through the 5th. So it looks like they backpedaled on this a little bit, which I think is a good thing. I think this is a big enough deal for, it's 250th anniversary. Kings Island used to be the place to be for fireworks on the 4th of July. Hopefully they do something cool. I've always enjoyed the fireworks show on the 4th of July with the drones and everything. The fact that it's not just on the 4th of July means that if I have something going on the 4th of July, I can go to one of the other dates. I think it's kind of exciting. But in typical fashion, now this might have been updated by the time this episode drops, but I wanted to confirm it on the website. And the website, as of this recording, says Star Spangled Night, presented by M&M's, and that's July 3rd through the 5th. So it's still one night, but it's 3 nights long. So the attention to detail is astounding, isn't it?
Yeah, it's not what it once was there. But, you know, I think you're right. It is, you know, Kings Island's always a special place to be on the 4th of July when they do the fireworks, whether it's, you know, one night or it's spread out over 3. It's one of the most immersive fireworks displays that you're going to see, you know, in the region. You know, so if you're not down on the river, you know, for the WEBN, you know, fireworks, and that this is the place to be. If you're there for fireworks, the only thing that I wish they would go back to is the park used to be open until midnight on the 4th, and everyone had a chance after the fireworks to go get, you know, another ride in or two on the Beast or, you know, Diamondback or some of the other rides in the park at night. So I wish they would go back to being open until midnight, but it's still, you know, if you're looking for something to do on the 4th or now the 3rd and the 5th, you know, if they're going to do the same show all 3 nights, you know, certainly plan to visit the Kings Island.
Yeah. And I one more thing I want to throw in there, because this is really cool. We got an email from a gentleman named Brad, and he said he made shirts for Father's Day and couldn't help but make the kids wear them a couple weekends in a row. His daughter's wearing a BC shirt, his son's wearing a Son of B shirt, and him wearing a B shirt. I wanted to throw this up there. I think it's super cool. You got the Beast, Beastie, and Son of Beast. So, Brad, I appreciate
Love that.
Yeah, I think it's really cool. Why did they ever discuss naming the whatever it's called to Back to the Beastie when you were at the park? Because it's so dumb.
I brought it up, but it went nowhere.
Oh, really? I thought for the 50th they'd do that. Actually, they were selling that wood like home decor thing, and it had the Beastie on it as opposed to whatever the Snoopy name is, probably for copyright reasons. But the rumor going around was they did that to get ahead of the whole, like, we're going to rename it the Beastie next year. But it should be the Beastie. I still call it the Beastie. I still, in my mind, cannot think of what it's called now. It's the Beastie.
Yeah, I wish it was called the Beastie. They had a nice, you know, the ID sign at the entrance. I mean, that was really cool, and it was a big deal for kids. You know, they had the tunnel going down the first drop. So I would love to see it go back to the Beastie. So yeah, I especially like for the 50th, that was one of the things I brought up. We should go back to the Beastie, but it was like, no, it's got to fit Planet Snoopy and, you know, and all that kind of a thing. And then when Diamondback was introduced, I wanted to take, it was at that time, it was Little Bill, you know, was the name of the coaster, which is now the Great Pumpkin Coaster. I said we should call that Junior Diamondback.
That'd be funny.
So I'm big on things like that, you know, that tie in. I was recently at Camden Park, and they have like the Little Dipper and the Big Dipper, you know, and for families, and that's a big deal because a lot of kids couldn't ride the Big Dipper yet. So the Little Dipper, you know, at Camden Park, and made a big deal. So I would like to see that, but I don't think we'll see that.
Yeah, I don't need. Okay, there will be a day, and it'll be in the next 10 to 20 years that it's the Beastie again. I guarantee you, because they need something where they can do something that's different, that's cheap. That's what they'll do. But let's neither here nor there. Let's give a shout out to our Prestige members. I want to give a big shout out to Miss Mandy, 1983, Lil Mac, 21, Brian Hauser, 330T, Aaron Bort, Jacob Fix, Damon Barnes, Dakota Cole, Eric Grau, Gibson Hills, Dustin Jackson, Songstress Miku, Medic 302, Eastern Coaster, Guys and Girls, Justin Y, Mike Garrett, Galaxy B-Boy, Greggy Rocks, Kayla La, T. Cleveland, Tim Dwelly, Sun Fun Sarah, and Ian Ross, and Connors Lionel Trains. Thank you guys so much for supporting Tower Topics at the highest level. That's the Prestige level. If you want to be involved in Tower Topics, there's a link in the description. Members get early access to the videos, exclusive content, exclusive live streams, and some tiers and get some free stuff. So hit that link if you're interested. It just starts at $2.99 a month. It's the best way to support Tower Topics. Stick around. We got the listener questions coming up next. All right. Today's listener question, Sam from Crescent Springs, said, what's the advantage of joining a roller coaster enthusiast club and attending certain events, specifically ACE for Kings Island? I'm a new roller coaster enthusiast who has no context for the benefits of roller coaster clubs. Thanks for your time. Don, you're more qualified than I am for this.
I think the big thing, I mean, you know, there are those different events that, you know, Kings Island and some other parks in the region have for coaster clubs. ACE does a lot of regional events. So I think that's, you know, a great opportunity there to, you know, visit some of those other parks. But you get to meet a lot of people when you're in a club like ACE that share the same interest. It's the camaraderie. For me, those events are fine with ERT and all that, but it's the camaraderie and just talking to other people that have those same interests and meeting new people, making new friends. So for me, that's what the benefit of being in a roller coaster club is. It's the camaraderie.
Well, and I mean, they're the logistic things too. Like you get access to specific events and stuff. If you're asking what happens at the events, you get a lot of exclusive ride time. Typically, there's typically a catered meal. You often have Q&A with like park leadership or industry people and stuff. So if you're interested in a little bit more of the nitty gritty, then those are some of the things that you get to do. We've done scavenger hunts and
behind the scene tours.
Yeah, exactly. So if you consider yourself a coaster enthusiast, you want to meet other coaster enthusiasts, and if you want to have special access, that's a fantastic way to go.
Yeah, and they have a quarterly magazine with ACE, Roller Coaster Magazine. It is a fantastic publication. Just some of the most beautiful coaster photos that you're going to see, and that comes out again like quarterly. So, I was introduced to ACE, back in 1981, and just some of my, I have friends that I met in 1981 that are still some of my best friends today. So it's it's a great organization. They do a lot of good for the industry, and like I said, you get those, the quarterly magazine, you get the different region events that go on, and sometimes you have like every year ACE has the spring conference somewhere. They have a summer conference. They have off-season events at different places. So it's certainly worth becoming an ACE member.
Yeah, and I can honestly tell you, like I'm a college graduate, but I feel like my experience in the workforce, and especially with running KI Central, has really formed me into the person that I am. You had a lot to do with that, Don, not to make you blush. But you if you're interested in the business end of things, it's a really good place to be, because you're going to have the marketing people talk to you, engineers talk to you, park leadership talk to you, and you're going to find out not necessarily the what, but the why behind stuff. Mm-hmm. And for me, that's far more intriguing than, why it happens rather than what happens.
Yeah, the ERT and stuff is nice, but it's all those other things I think are even more valuable.
Mm-hmm. All right. Hey, I'm Ryan. That's Don. This is Tower Topics.